Thank you, Michaela Oberholzer and Myrna. Great way to open our service. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
And Christmas is here. The season has arrived and we're enjoying every moment of it. So good to see all of you here this morning. If you're visiting with us or if it's your first time here, a very special welcome to you. We're delighted to have you with us. God bless you as you worship with us today. And if that is the case for you, we would love to get to know you and tell you a little bit about our church. Inside your bulletin, you'll find this little slip. It's called the connection card. If you would give us your name and mailing address, this week we will have delivered to your home a package from us. It will be full of information about our church. It will include an Antrim Church coffee mug full of candy and some other treats there for you that you will enjoy and will help to bring us together in knowing who each other is. So please do that. When the offering plate is passed, just drop that in and we'll be in touch. Everybody, please remember to sign in on the attendance pads. sign in with your name, send us a message if you like. A way we simply try to keep in touch with each other as a church family, so please help us with that. Announcements are going to be lean this morning. Coming up this coming weekend, our annual Christmas concert, community choir concert, Gloria in Excelsis. 2 performances. One will be Saturday evening at 7, and then Sunday afternoon at 4. So come in good time to get a seat. The past few years, it has been packed out. We have 124 singers this year, which is the largest yet, and it's a wonderful program of music glorifying God. So do come and bring your friends. You will find posters and brochures in the lobby. Take as many as you can use at this later date now to spread the word in your neighborhood or your office, wherever, and let's fill the place. Also, looking ahead to the next season, coming up in February is our Night to Shine. We still need more volunteers. You will find information about that in the bulletin. Please check that out. But also today, out in the lobby, you will find a Night to Shine table set up and people there with their computer ready to sign you up. So if you are interested in that, or if you have questions, do talk to them following the service today. We have one additional announcement at this time from our treasurer, Hershey Bowers, and so here he comes.
Thank you. Well, good morning again, Antrim Church family. As treasurer, I want to say a great big thank you to each of you for sharing your financial blessings through tithes and offerings to support our ministries here at Antrim. You just do an awesome job. You're so very, very generous, and we appreciate that. Thank you, and God bless you. Each year, we have a special year-end Christmas offering. We set a goal towards some project and needed project. And on Sunday, December 23rd, all worship offerings will be combined to meet this goal. We have decided to, again, this year, make our offering for capital improvements. Our initial building, which is this sanctuary, is 42 years old. And our most recent addition, the FLC, is almost 17 years old. So we're at the point of needing some upgrades. Your very generous special year-end offerings in 2016 and 17 have helped us fund a number of upgrades. We've upgraded to LED lighting, all the outdoor parking lot and wall lights, the fellowship hall ceiling lights, all hallways in the library, the FLC ceiling lights. We've replaced and enlarged the FLC front motorized screen and projector, and we've upgraded the FLC sound system to a digital soundboard. So thank you so much for giving. With the age of our buildings, we need to begin replacing shingles. We completed the office area in 2018 at a cost of $56,000. With all the rain this past summer, our west wing needed some roof repairs. So we're going to replace the shingles in the sanctuary here and the west wing in 2019 at a cost of about $70,000. That's a total of $126,000. Therefore, we're going to set our special year-end Christmas offering goal on December 23rd at $80,000. That will help fund a large portion of the needed shingle replacement costs. And if you, our Antrim Church family, feel very, very generous, just maybe we can fund the entire amount. You pray about it, give as God directs. Together we can reach our goal of $80,000. You know, folks, God is doing great things here at Antrim. Each year in the past 5 years, our welcome team has visited and delivered welcome gifts to about 100 new families or individuals. Our Sunday school attendance and our worship attendance have been steadily increasing over the past 5 years. We're grateful. It's just so exciting to have all you new individuals and families joining us here at Antrim. Isn't it just awesome to be part of a growing Antrim Church family? Thank you so much for sharing. God bless.
Thank you, Hershey. We are going to go to worship now and start, of course, by singing some carols. But the first one we're going to sing is I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. The cruel miseries caused by the Civil War greatly distressed the beloved American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. With heaviness of spirit, he put his thoughts into words to create the fine carol, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. Since he was the most influential American poet of his day, Longfellow brought fresh courage and renewed faith to many of his countrymen who read his poem. He maintained a strong belief in God's goodness and personal concern for his people. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day was written in 1864 for Longfellow's church in Massachusetts. It originally had 7 stanzas, and references to the Civil War are prevalent in the verses that we normally omit today. The plain, direct wording of the 5 verses we normally sing give clear message that God is still in command, and in his own time will cause the right to triumph and will bring peace and goodwill to earth again. Pay attention to these wonderful words as we sing them together. Let's stand as we sing. I heard the bells. rejoicing, free from sorrow, praises voicing, greet the morrow. Christ the babe was born for you. Christ the babe was born for you. Be seated.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow, snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter,
Good morning. This morning we continue in worship through prayer, and this morning's focus is on Prayer to One Ministries, a ministry run by Steve and Bonnie Westbury and other members of their team. So let's join together this morning and pray. Father God, we worship you this morning. Thankful that we are able to give you our hearts. Lord, at times that seems so small. But Lord, we thank you that you have done so much for us. You brought us into relationship with you and enabled us to worship you. Father, I pray that we will continue to do that. Draw us into your presence there this morning. Lord, this morning we want to lift up Steve and Bonnie Westbury and the ministry that they live out and operate in. Lord, I thank you for the many relationships that they have built with people, both near and far, for the advancement of your kingdom. Lord, I pray that you continue to give them wisdom and guidance as they live out this ministry calling that you have placed in their lives. Lord, I pray that they would work well with their team, with the Gliddens and with Amber in New York City. And Lord, and also any other areas of the world that they are involved in. Lord, I pray that you would strengthen the relationships that you have allowed them to build. Lord, I pray that through those relationships, people will come to know you as their Lord and Savior, as their Father. Lord, so that they would know you and they would see your Son through Steve and Bonnie. Lord, this morning I want to lift up their team that's going to Haiti here in the new year and end of February. Lord, I pray that this trip would be for your glory, for your honor, and that you would establish the path that this team is going to walk on. Lord, I pray that you would work out logistics and the people that they will meet. Father, I pray you prepare both the hearts of the people they will meet and also the hearts of the team members to be used by you, to be willing to do what you are calling them to do and what you've laid on their heart. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be involved in your ministry as part of your body, the church. Lord, this morning we'll lift up Dottie Kreider and Bob's family as we were able to celebrate with his family on Friday, his homegoing at his funeral service. Lord, we thank you for the many tributes we heard from the family, celebrating the awesome aspects you've placed in Bob's life, as witnessed by his family and his church family here. Lord, we pray for Dottie and the family as they continue to grieve the loss of Bob. Lord, we thank you for the awesome ministry you've done through Bob and Dottie throughout the years. And Lord, for his mission of taking as many people to heaven with him. Lord, thank you for his faithfulness and for empowering him to do the mission you've called him. Lord, this morning we want to thank you for being able to be here, to worship together, to hear the truth of your word presented to us. Lord, I pray you open our ears, open our hearts, tear down the walls that are standing in between you and us. Lord, I pray that you would allow us to draw close to you this morning, to hear your truth. And Father, thank you for the opportunity to participate in the tithes and offerings here this morning. In your name we pray. Amen.
Let him know when we find the baby. He too would like to worship this new king. But then instructions came from a different order. Instructions that only come from dreams. Dreams of biblical proportions. And this is what the dream said. Don't return to the king. So simple, so straightforward. And that is the dilemma that I'm wrestling with. Do I listen to earthly authority, or maybe do I listen to the godly type? And the traveler in me, the wise man as it were, would it say, go see King Herod and give him what he wants? But my heart tells a different story. My heart says that maybe this child deserves every ounce of obedience that I could give, even if I don't quite understand the roadmap yet. If following a star seemed difficult, following this new king may be the greatest challenge yet. Yes, my friend, I think you and I, we are going to take the long way home.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome again to Antrim this Christmas season. Welcome to those who are joining us online or who will be here just a little bit while later at 11 o'clock today. We are going to talk about the state of your heart this morning, the state of our hearts. And here at the outset, I want to say, appreciate the work our musicians put in week after week. We've been listening to Carol the Bells at the house. I love that song, and I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard it played by bells. So that was terrific this morning. We're going to talk about the state of our hearts this morning, the tendency that we have to try to perform before God, to rely on our own effort, and how Christmas is about the appearance of the one who makes even the wise men, even the elites of this world, fall on their knees in worship of another. We're in John 1, verses 16 through 18. Mentioned last week that John's prologue has at least elements of a chiasm to it, and so we're going to work at the outer edges and build up to Christmas Sunday and Christmas Eve at the peak of the passage in the middle. John 1, 16 and 18, the tail end of the opening this morning. We're going to hear about the fullness of grace. Last week it was the fullness of God in human flesh. This week the fullness of grace. And in that fullness of grace, we are going to see something about working, dreaming, resting, and seeing. Out of John 1, 16 through 18. Working, dreaming, resting, seeing. John says, from the fullness of his grace we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side or who is in the bosom of the Father, has made him known. The word of the Lord. First, working. Now, by work, I do not necessarily mean what you do for a living. I don't necessarily mean your job, though the type of work I am going to talk about could manifest itself in your life at your job. But by work, what I primarily mean is this tendency of our hearts to try to be good enough before God. The tendency of our hearts to try to earn something from God, to try to perform spiritually. And I mentioned that kind of working this morning. I mentioned that kind of working in a message on grace, a passage on grace. I mentioned work for two reasons. The first is, inasmuch as grace is unearned favor, an unmerited gift, inasmuch as that is what grace is, well then it is all grace. Everything is grace. When we set out this contrast between the law through Moses and Christ, sometimes we almost give the impression like there was no grace beforehand. But even when the Old Covenant believers, when the Old Covenant community of faith, even when they brought their tithes, when they obeyed the law, even that was grace. There was grace even in that. He causes his sun to shine on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's all by grace. The fact that they had anything to give from in the first place, that's grace. The fact that they were even aware of God's standard, God's law, there was grace in that. So I mentioned working in a message on grace to help us remember that it is all by grace. Even when we rely on our own strength, that very strength is a gift from God. The second reason why I mention works in a passage on grace is because that is what you and I are going to be tempted to rely on instead of Christ's grace. We are going to be tempted to rely on a system of performance instead of what he has done for us. Now, we of course don't use the same terminology as the law of Moses. John says, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. We don't use those same terms, the law of Moses, but I would almost take for granted that even those of us who know Christ, who believe in him, who say we would follow him, we've been following him for years, we still have parts of our heart where we're trying to rely on what we do for him. One way that you can recognize that is if, inasmuch as you try to rely on your own efforts, you know one way that shows up in your own life? Continued irritability with people who get in the way of what you are trying to do, right? You're trying to accomplish something, somebody else is an obstacle to that. When your response is irritability, and I'm speaking from experience, when our response is to get annoyed, it's because we are relying on what we do. That's one way you can recognize it. Another way you can recognize relying on works is this. When something goes wrong, when something in your life goes dreadfully wrong, and the thought comes to your mind, maybe you say it, maybe you just think it, or maybe even it comes and you do your best to suppress it right away, but nonetheless it is still there. When something goes wrong and you think, God, what have I done to deserve this? The minute you say that, the minute your heart goes there, you know I still have a tendency. My default is to think that what I get from God is dependent upon what I do for him, performance. You're relying on works. What have I done to deserve this? We're relying on works. Now, when that's true, a third thing that will happen is there will be accusations in your heart, accusations in your own mind. There will be accusations because whenever you try to rely on measuring up to some standard, somewhere deep down you will know you're not doing it. You're not doing a good enough job. You're not actually measuring up. Accusations might come from the outside, an enemy, an external enemy. Accusations might come from the inside, just your own conscience. But whether it's yourself or whether it's Satan's power, either way, the voice will come, you're not doing it well enough. You're not doing it good enough. And even if you try to suppress that consciously, you know where that voice will rise to the surface? In your dreams. In your dreams. You're dreaming. And we saw in the video a reference to dreaming. Very often we approach dreams wondering whether they are going to tell us the future. Far more often our dreams are our subconscious's way of communicating with us. Most of the things, the people, the parts in our dreams are representations of the various pieces of our own subconscious finally rising to the surface. Now, I want you to know that I know the word dream does not appear in this passage. I know that. The subject of dreaming does not come up directly. And so I am mentioning dreaming this morning not because of some magic interpretive trick like, aha, it's actually in there. It's in John 1:16 through 18. If you've read through this part of John many, many times, you say, I've never seen dreaming in there before. That's okay. All right, I'm not trying to pretend like the word itself is in there. I am mentioning dreaming this morning to help us understand what John is referring to when he says the law. The law was given through Moses. There is a system of performance and a system of receiving. And whenever we rely on the system of receiving, of performing before God instead of receiving, whenever we rely on trying to perform before God, you never quite measure up. And whether you have the honesty to admit it consciously or not, your subconscious knows it. Have you ever had the dream where you are, shall we say, less than fully attired in front of other people? Have you ever had that dream? Liars. Come on. Have you ever had the dream where you're not fully clothed and there are other people around? It's right up there with falling. Next to falling, not being fully clothed in public is one of the most common dreams that we have. Well, you've had it. Most of us in this room have had it. What's going on? Most of our dreams are not prophetic. Isn't that fortunate? Most of our dreams are not telling us the future. Most of our dreams are our subconscious voices speaking to us. What's going on in that dream? You try your hardest to put on a front. You know there's something lacking with you. You try your hardest to give off the right appearance, to clothe yourself in what you have done. And even if consciously you can arrange all the data points in a way that would satisfy your own standard, somewhere deep down you know you're not doing a good enough job. And so this dream comes, I'm afraid I'm going to be found out. I'm afraid I'm going to be exposed. I'm afraid I'm going to be found lacking. The system of trying to give off the right appearance, utterly afraid, appropriately so, that it will be found out that we've not actually done a good enough job. I got a dream. Now, it's not just clothing. Not long ago, I had a dream where I was in the woods during hunting season, and I had a gun, but not a license. And this dream happened before the stories we heard from Bob Kreider's grandsons at his funeral on Friday. I had a dream where I was in the woods, I had the gun, but I had no license. Brent Hay was with me. We came across this huge herd of deer. We saw a couple of 4- and 6-point bucks walk past us. Brent was trying to egg me on to shoot them. And I looked at Brent and I said, Brent, a herd this big, there's got to be a massive one out there. And no sooner had I said that than this buck, can you picture Bambi's dad? Do you remember Bambi's dad in the Disney movie? This enormous buck rises up out of the grass, 12 to 16 points minimum. He takes off running, and I turn and shoot. I can't tell you, I don't have real life hunting stories to tell you, so I'll tell you dreams. I turn and shoot, and I hit it. And we track this deer. I had been hesitant about whether or not to pull the trigger. Brent was the one egging me on, saying, do it, and it's not Brent's fault, okay? Remember, most of the things in our dreams are representations of our own subconscious. So it's that there's this inner battle within me. Should I or shouldn't I? Part of me thinks I should, part of me thinks I shouldn't. My mom was once mad at my dad for half of a day, and my dad could not figure out why. When he finally asked her, he said, I don't know what I did. She went on to tell him it was something he had done in a dream to her the night before. Right? He says, it's not my fault. There's nothing I can do about that. Right? You don't want to be on my mom's bad side. Right? It was not Brent's fault. It was my own voice expressing itself through Brent. Should I or shouldn't I? Take the shot. I do. I hit it. We track the deer. And as we were coming up to the deer, a third person comes up behind us, an unknown man. And he simply begins to ask questions. Who shot the deer? Where were you when you shot it? And I can't take credit for it because I have no license. This is like that silly old joke about the pastor who skips church to go golfing. On a Sunday, God gives him a hole-in-one, and he can't tell anybody about it because he skipped church. Right? It's like that, only worse. In a dream, I go from where I can't even, not only can I not tell him, can I not own up that I shot this massive trophy buck, but I end up actually by the end of the dream in fear that they're going to find me and throw me in jail. And not only am I going to go to jail, but I'm going to have my entire career stripped from me. Because who's going to follow a spiritual leader who doesn't even abide by the laws of the land? What's going on in a dream like that? It's blatantly transparent once you see it all at the end. I have a heart desire to do something great, to do something impressive, to do something that will wow. I finally do it. And the voice of accusation comes, but you didn't do it well enough. You didn't do it good enough. There was some imperfection. There was something lacking in the very way you went about it. You're actually going to lose everything in as much as what you were trying to rely on, what you were going to do. Do you know what it is to live by performance? The law was given. The law was given. The law was given. Do you know what it is to live by law? You try to measure up, you do your best, and still the voice comes, found wanting, insufficient, take it all away, remove it. Do you know what it is to try to rely on your own performance before God? You try to live by law, it'll never get you where you're trying to go. That is what John is getting after when he says the law was given through Moses. The law was given, and like a tidal wave lifting a boat off of a sandbar, John describes for us something better. When a boat is stuck on a reef or on a sandbar, the men can go and row as much as they want. That boat's not going anywhere. But when the tidal wave comes in and lifts the boat, the men continue their rowing, but now they are not working on their own. They are working in harmony with a power greater than their own effort. And that boat is dislodged and begins to move. John gives us the tidal wave of grace. The law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. This is the gospel. Grace and truth. Now that phrase, grace and truth, picks up on a line from chapter 1, verse 14. We're going to get to that in 2 weeks. In between 14 and 16 is this line about John the Baptist. He is tearing the prologue. We're going to get to that line next week. The Word became flesh, 1:14, the Word became flesh, came from the Father, full of grace and truth. From the fullness of His grace, we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. He's picking up on verse 14. Given, Moses gave something external to him, and he gave it, came. It was not separable from Christ, but rather it appeared as Christ appeared, not separable from Christ. And look what John says about this. Verse 18. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known. Now that phrase, at the Father's side, can also be translated in the bosom of the Father. It is a picture of intimacy. It is a picture of closeness. And it is a picture of rest. Of resting. An end to your working, an end to your trying to earn. In the bosom is the same phrase that is used of Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom in the parable in Luke 16. It is the same phrase that is used for John the disciple reclining at Jesus' bosom at the Last Supper in chapter 13 of this book. Reclining in the bosom of, it is a picture of divine, eternal, intimate rest. In contrast to all of our striving under the law, Jesus came to offer us the rest He had known from all eternity. A.B. Simpson was the man who had founded the Christian Missionary Alliance, and he said, true peace is nothing less than the deep divine tranquility of His own eternal calm. Have you been slaving? Have you been striving, trying to perform? Have you been hearing the accusations? Enter His rest, His calm, the bosom of the Father. Your efforts can never attain this. What we try to rely on in our own hearts can never attain this. In Romans chapter 9, Paul speaks of those who were not pursuing the law, stumbling upon righteousness by faith, obtaining righteousness. But those who were seeking the law of righteousness could never attain it. And the difference between those two words, obtain and attain, the difference between those two words is the difference between the law and grace. That's the gospel. Obtain versus attain. Obtain, you don't earn it, you just happen to get it. You're walking through the woods, walking through a field, and you stumble upon a treasure chest or a massive buck. You stumble upon something, or a stranger appears to you and gives it to you. You receive it, you have obtained it, but you've never earned it. You did not attain it. Attain is the system where you try, you do your best to get it. It's the difference between receiving versus achieving. This is the gospel. The difference between obtain and attain. This is how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. How we set our hearts at rest. Whenever our hearts condemn us, whenever the accusations come, for God is greater than our hearts. This grace is like an elevated railway, zipping along above the thoroughfares while everybody else muddles through the traffic lights. It's like a great subterranean subway, going through the deepest excavations of our heart while everyone else slogs through all of the intersections. This grace is like the sun that melts an iceberg and makes it a cloud. Picture a glacier. Picture a giant iceberg. How much human effort, ingenuity it would take to raise that iceberg up to the skies. How much strength it would take. But let the sun come and do its work and melt that ice, change it, soften it, transform it, and it will be born above. It's a totally different power. He came to give you rest through a power your striving will never produce. When New York City was beginning to sprawl over 100 years ago, as New York City began to grow and expand with the emergence of the railroad stations, areas that were once very poor tenements, poor houses, suddenly became quite valuable pieces of property. A.B. Simpson wrote this during that time, and for those who are aware and interested, this would predate C.S. Lewis's similar analogy about the cottage and the palace by about half a century. A.B. Simpson wrote this: in the upper portion of New York City, many citizens may have often noticed a great number of miserable shanties standing now on the choicest of sites. Though perhaps on the corner of a splendid new avenue or looking out on a magnificent prospect, the house was now utterly unworthy of the site, just a shanty. Suppose that a millionaire should want to purchase this site, and that the owner should begin, before giving possession of the tenement to the millionaire, suppose the owner should try to repair that old shanty for the new owner. Put some fresh thatch on the miserable roof and a new coat of whitewash on the dirty walls. How the purchaser would laugh at him and would say, "My friend, I do not want your miserable old wreck of a tenement fixed up like that. At the best, it will only be a shanty when you have done all you can, and I will never live in that. All I want is the ground, the site. And when I get it, I will raise that old heap of rubbish to the foundations and dig deep down to the solid rock before I will build my splendid mansion. I will then build the base from my own new house according to my magnificent plan. I do not want a vestige of your house. All I require is your location." Let him tear it down. All he needs is your heart. All he needs is the site. Stop trying to fix it up. Stop trying to thatch your roofs spiritually. Let him raise it to the ground and build something entirely new. And the way he will, the way you can have that last, is when you see. is by seeing. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, has made him known. You know, one of the great problem for the human race is that we cannot see God. We cannot see the one we need. On the one hand, it's a physical problem. How will our physical eyes take in infinite spirit? It's a physical problem. But it's also something much deeper than that, even greater than that. It's a spiritual problem. It's a sin problem. How can our sinful eyes, our sinful minds and hearts take in infinite, pure holiness without being consumed? We can't see God, lest we be utterly undone ourselves. In the Old Testament, Isaiah saw but a glimpse of God, just the hem of his robe, the train of his robe, and just a glimpse, and Isaiah said, "Woe to me, I'm undone." Even Moses, in those passages that talk about Moses seeing God face to face compared with the rest of the Israelites, not using a mediator to interact with God, but seeing him directly compared to everybody else, even those passages are careful to qualify the experience that Moses had. Moses saw but the form of the Lord. He was hid in the cleft of the rock and had to be hid till the glory of the Lord in full passed by, and then he saw the back of the Lord, as it were. Sinful man cannot see God without being destroyed. And here, John says, but God, the one and only, has made him known. Trinitarian language, once again, paralleling the first part of the chapter. God himself, with God, Trinitarian language, God himself yet with God, now in the flesh, making the unseeable God known. And perhaps I should say knowing or believing. Perhaps that would be better terminology. We do live in the age where we don't see Christ physically with our own eyes. So perhaps knowing or believing might be better, but I'm sticking with seeing to bring out the scandal of Christmas, the scandal of the incarnation, and the scandal of the cross. How did Christ make it possible for you to see God? Jesus Christ comes in the flesh. He goes to the cross, and he says, and I'm paraphrasing, he goes to the cross and he says, "Dad, where are you? Where are you?" The darkness settles. He does not see his Father. The one who is in the bosom of the Father from all eternity was cast out, was exposed, went into utter darkness, lost his access, gave up that infinite divine rest and calm to give it to you. At that cross, he says, "It is finished." The work you're striving is at an end. He gave up. He left that place of being in the bosom to bring you into it. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, has made him known. And we know that when we see him, we shall be like him, for we shall see him face to face. Revelation 21, we will have his name on our foreheads. We will see him face to face. Have you known this rest through believing, through seeing the Son of God, crucified, resurrected, ascended, the fullness of grace for you? Let's pray together. Lord, your word says elsewhere, when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under law, to redeem those under law, that we might receive full rights of sons. Help us to recognize what goes on in our own hearts. Help us to discern the accusations for what they are, and allow them to lead us, to cause us to run to your very presence, your completed work, that we might lay down our striving and enter your rest. Give us your grace to this end, I pray. Amen. God rest ye, merry gentlemen, who came to save us all from Satan's power, the voice of the accuser. Let's stand and give him praise for this work that he has done. Let's sing together about his rest.
God rest ye, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. From God our Heavenly Father, a blessed angel came, and unto certain shepherds brought tidings of the same. How that in Bethlehem was born the Son of God by name. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Fear not, said the angel, let nothing you affright. This day is born a Savior of your virgin bride, to free all those who trust in him from Satan's power and might. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. The shepherds and the tidings rejoice much in their mind, and left their flocks a feeding in tempest, storm, and wind, and went to Bethlehem straightway the Son of God to find. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. And when they came to Bethlehem, where our dear Savior lay, they found him in a manger, where oxen feed on hay. His mother Mary, kneeling down unto the Lord did pray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Now to the Lord sing praises, all you within this place, and with true love and brother, each other now embrace. This holy time of Christmas time, all others does efface. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
Fear not, tidings of comfort and joy. Recognize your sin. Repent, believe in the death and resurrection of the Son of God. He will give you rest. If you are new, visiting with us, I'd love to chat with you at the back following the service. For those who may be new at 11 o'clock, you can simply make your way downstairs, and I'd love to talk with you there. This week, let us go and live in his rest. God bless you.